TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
Hi, I'm your inner dream monologue, and you're fast asleep, so I'll be quick. Great job using the Colgate Optic White Overnight Teeth Whitening Pen before bed. When used as directed, it gives you a visibly whiter smile in just 7 days. So while I fly and talk to animals, you're removing teeth stains with ease. Sweet dreams. And when you wake up, keep on living life to the brightest. Colgate Optic White. Find it at all major retailers.
Matt, we are joined by a return guest, a man who took us down the nature trail to hell a couple albums ago. And
in
now,
3D.
In 3D. And now I never anticipate anyone to pick a polka, but yet a few people have. And today we have a man picking the Hot Rocks polka, Christian of Marvel Movie Talk and the Geekscape Book Club and a ton of other geeky podcasts. Christian, welcome back to the show.
I'm very happy to be here. It's very exciting to talk about a song and a style of song that was completely lost on me for probably the first 14 years of my life. The polka medley, and I think that the one we're going to talk about today might actually be the moment where it hit me like, oh, that's why these are so great.
So let me ask you, so before we even dive into this polka, I think the big question is to start off with all of our feelings on the Rolling Stones. Are we fans? Do we love them? I know that they're frequently kind of second place to the Beatles as like greatest or most important rock band of all time, according to journalists. Where do we land on all this?
Well, the listeners cannot see this, but Christian is sitting in front of us wearing a Rolling Stones t-shirt. So I'm going to assume that he's at least something of, and he picked this parody, this polka. I feel like that says a lot about your take right away, but let's start with that.
Well, yeah,
Christian.
I think that definitely grew up a fan of the Stones. And I think that obviously there's, in the 60s, there's this idea, are you a Beatles guy or gal? Are you a Beatles person or a Stones person? And it really says a lot about who you were as to which one. The difference really is that, we have almost 55 more years of the Rolling Stones. Now, granted, they haven't made music during all that time. So the body of work is a lot easier to point at. I mean, the Beatles were long disbanded by the time we got Exile on Main Street. And we could stop right there and be like, they're a great band. So I think that, I saw them probably about a year and a half ago. I saw them in Vegas. My dad somehow had never seen them because the only time he tried to see them, he had driven out to California and they were going to go to the concert at Altamont, which, if you know anything about the Stones, didn't end very well. So he always felt glad that he changed his mind and didn't go to that show. But so I went, and look, they're still great. I mean, Keith barely moves. Mick, in his like almost 80-year-old, physique, moves more than I did even in my early 20s. And it's impressive to watch. Yeah, they pretty much come out and play the hits. As far as I can tell, though, they're singing live, which you can't say about a lot of bands anymore. They have a lot of backup singers. So it's still a great spectacle. And the music, I think, for the most part, really holds up. And so still a fan for sure. And, I think that even if you compare only the time where the Beatles were recording and the Stones were recording, they're still right up there. You can pick whichever one you want, and everybody wins.
So I've been of the mind, I'm still on a Rolling Stones journey here right now. But one thing that I've always thought was that it's it's an unfair comparison. It's a real apples to oranges on the Rolling Stones versus the Beatles, I think. Yeah. And I've heard people make this argument now in the last 10 years than ever before. But really the better comparison would be like Beatles or Beach Boys, as they were both doing a lot more experimentation with sound, whereas Rolling Stones have always just been a blues rock band that would dabble with studio stuff, but The Beatles and Beach Boys were a lot of like stuff that cannot be recreated live because it's so much studio work.
Yeah. It is funny how the comparison happens because the way that people talk about Beatles versus the Rolling Stones, you would think it was this rivalry.
Yeah.
Like they were like, I'm going to get you. And they were not. They were friends. They worked together. They knew each other. And if anything, you're absolutely right, Matt. That was the thing. Like the Beatles made Rubber Soul, and the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson heard that and was like, oh, that's amazing. And then he wrote Pet Sounds. And then the Beatles were like, oh my God. Like we have to, like, they were trying to one up each other constantly with their writing and production and just like songcraft, studio engineering tricks.
Right. And the tremendous respect between the Beatles and the Beach Boys. I've heard Paul McCartney say on more than one occasion that God Only Knows is the best pop song ever written.
And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
He's probably right. But yeah, and even that's your good point, because that's not a rivalry either. That was just a friendly competition of just being like blown away 100%. By one of your peers. And being, I think, like, how can they do this?
The only other person that I think impressed the Beatles as much as the Beach Boys would have been Harry Nilsson. Like, they were flabbergasted by Harry Nilsson.
Yeah, and of course, he was just a fan, too. Like, his first record is just, like, Beatles covers, because he just loved them so much. But
there's a great story that he tells in the documentary, Who is Harry Nilsson and Why is Everybody Talking About Him? Which, if you have not seen that music documentary, easily, like, top 10 music documentaries ever
good.
made. But he tells the story of, like, he's like, I put out the album, and my phone rings, and it's like, hey, this is Paul McCartney, heard the album, love it. And I was like, yeah, sure it is. I hang up the phone. He goes, and then I get a call, and it's, hey, this is George Harrison. Heard the album. Absolutely love it. And I'm like, sure thing. And he hangs up. He goes, I get a third call. Hey, this is John Lennon. Heard the record. Absolutely love it. He goes, so then I just sat by the phone waiting for Ringo to call. And he never did. But I was his best man at his wedding, so I guess that counts for something.
I would have thought that the better end of that story would have been like Ringo actually does call, and he's like, well, this must be real, because no one would pretend to be Ringo.
No one would pretend to be Ringo. So the other thing that I've learned with the Rolling Stones, and this may also say a lot about where I land on this polka as a whole, is that I've really kind of learned that I definitely like the Rolling Stones deep cuts way more than the big hits. Like my favorite, probably at this point in time, my favorite Stones song is 100 Years off of Goat Head Soup, which is like not exactly a big hit song. And prior to that, it was like She Smiled Sweetly. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's these cool B-sides on their records that are way more in that like bluesy, almost indie rock sound. It makes sense why, when you listen to those songs, it makes sense why the Rolling Stones show up in a lot of like Wes Anderson albums or movies, because like those B-sides tend to be, you can feel the influence of what that led to in even like 90s and 2000s indie rock musicianship.
You almost feel like a song like She's a Rainbow was designed to be used in movies 20 years later. It's almost like they know what we're, it's like,
Very true.
this is really ahead of its time. This is going to be great though. You'll see.
Yeah.
But
totally.
in this situation, these are all the hits. Al's bringing, I mean, it's a reference to the Hot Rocks 1964 to 1971 Greatest Hits album. I didn't check, but I'm assuming that every single one of these songs appears on that Greatest Hits compilation.
That's a good question. Maybe not, because he does do Shattered, which I think was a little bit later.
Miss You is long
and
after
Miss
that.
You is also a later track.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think he's just referencing, because Hot Rocks was a very popular comp for them, like sold really, really, really well.
Okay.
But yeah, no, there's a couple like later period tracks in here. Still hits, but yeah, not from what would be considered their heyday at this point. It's funny, just to back up a little bit on the Stones thing. I was one of those people who fell into the same trap that I was referencing about like when I was young, it was like, oh, the Beatles or the Stones, and I was such a huge Beatles fan, so like I was sort of like incorrectly, I felt like conditioned to be like, yeah, I don't like the Rolling Stones, and it was at the record shop later in life where I was encouraged by the owner of the shop, because I was like, yeah, I never really got into them. And then she told me to listen to, Christian, as you mentioned earlier, Exile on Main Street, which was an album I had not heard. It doesn't really have any big hits on it. But even just from track 1 on Exile, you're just like, it absolutely blew me away. Like, that is an incredible album, and immediately made me go back and reevaluate their entire catalog.
I'm going to do a very quick selfish and self-promotion here. Before my time with Kelsey Laurie, another podcast I produce, we did do a track-by-track breakdown of Exile on Main Street for one of its anniversaries.
There you go.
So
check
check out that for a deeper dive on why that album rules.
It's an incredible, incredible record. And as you said as well, Christian, the greatest band in the world can't compete with the legend of a band that was short-lived, like the Beatles, right? Like, it's just nothing you can do. The Rolling Stones could have put out consistently solid records for 50 years, and depending on who you are, you might actually think that's the case. But you can't compete with the legacy of the band that went for 10 years and then went out in a blaze of glory at the height of their success. Yeah. It's the same as Nirvana, any of these other acts. Like, it's not a fair comparison to the Stones.
It's the Chuck Klosterman proposed this in a book, and I've probably referenced it on here before, but the idea of, like, in some alternate dimension, Kurt Cobain is still alive, Nirvana has put out 20 albums, and Rivers Cuomo died after Pinkerton. And, like, Weezer is looked at with the legacy and admiration that Nirvana gets, and Nirvana's looked at with the, like, well, they started off good, and then they just kind of fell apart after their third album.
Nirvana would have continued to put out albums that no one cared about, like Pearl Jam did. You know, I mean, at a certain point.
I mean, it sucks to say because the Pearl Jam albums are good, but you're absolutely right. Post maybe Yield being, like, the last truly, like, mainstream release. It's like, I haven't heard a new Pearl Jam song in 20 years.
At some point in the early 2000s, Kurt Cobain would have, like, produced a Linkin Park record, and everyone would have been like, oh my God, no.
My favorite was he pitched that he's like, I could genuinely imagine a world where a, like, 50-something-year-old Kurt Cobain in his cardigan is, like, on MTV Unplugged doing a loungy version of Lithium, like Eric Clapton doing Layla. Like, he's like, it absolutely could have happened.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate, tragic reality for artists. It's just like, sometimes the best thing you can do is die.
I mean, you were talking about the Beach Boys earlier, and you know, how much bigger would the legacy be if it didn't include Kokomo? You know, I mean, if they stopped in like 1974, you know?
Yeah, it didn't include John Stamos becoming an official member of the band for a couple of years.
Yeah, it's very, very true, yeah. And now you have this weird split of, like, the Beach Boys who tour and Brian Wilson and other Beach Boys who are not allowed to use the name. It's crazy. It's crazy.
All right, so let's dive into the Hot Rocks Polka. Now that I think we've properly let the audience understand our feelings and where we're coming from.
on the Stones. Yeah. One quick note before we dive into it. There's just a fun fact about this. Of the album Polkas, this is the only one that they never played live.
Huh?
Yeah,
this has never been performed live on a stage.
I was surprised.
I know.
Thought this would have been a fun one to do at some point, you know?
Right? They didn't. I mean, if we're looking at every polka, obviously they never did, like, the Hamilton polka, which came out recently, and they never did the Pokemon polka Pokemon.
Yeah.
But that's like soundtrack outsider stuff. In terms of a polka that made it on a record, this is the only one that never was played live.
And I think that's another important thing to call out, is that as far as I know, I'm trying to remember, this is the only time where it is all songs by a singular artist, right? Like, you have Bohemian Polka.
It's the first time. Bohemian Polka comes later, which technically
I feel like that doesn't count.
Same.
That's a cover, essentially. But
it is a polka by a single artist.
That is true. I'm talking about a polka medley.
It's different than this. This is the only, and then the only other thing that comes close is the Hamilton polka, which is a medley of songs from one show. But this is the first time he's done a non-various artists polka. I guess we can call it that, right?
Yeah, and I think that this is the Rolling Stones get the distinct title of being the only band, because he could very easily do a Beatles polka. You know what I mean? Like, that's to do. But the Rolling Stones are the only group that he said, I can do a whole polka on just their hits and nobody else.
And not only that, prior to this polka, he had already done the Stones in 2 other polkas.
Yes, that's true.
He did Jumpin' Jack Flash.
Yeah, that was
and he did
45, I think, right?
That's right. And then he did the Harlem Shuffle in Polka Party, I believe.
You know, the most beloved of all the Rolling Stones.
The most beloved
hits.
of all of their. But that, I believe, and I tried to check this, and it was very difficult because it's just a long list of artists in his polkas. I think that makes the Stones the only artist ever who have made it into 3 Weird Al polkas.
The only group that I think maybe could have done it is he did a lot of REM songs in polkas, but I think he only did 2 in polka form.
I think Losing My Religion and Bang and Blame, if I'm looking at my list correctly here.
Because I think
know
I've talked
he definitely
about this
loves
before.
REM, but
he loves REM. If you look at how many times, if you include style parodies, song parodies, and polkas, REM is covered more than any other artist in Al's discography. It's wild.
And I think that the timing for why he did this, I mean, you can look at a few different spikes in the Stones' popularity. You know, they never really go away. But so 1989, they put out an album called Steel Wheels. They do their first big stadium tour. I believe since 1981, huge, like big, many dates. And so there was a lot of excitement. And like, there was a song on Steel Wheels called Sweet Emotion or Mixed Emotions. And I think it was the first time in a while that there was a new Stone song and people were like, you know what? It's not terrible. It was like people were actually excited about it. So I remember there being excitement for the Stones. I wasn't able to, convince my parents to take me at concerts just yet. So I didn't see them on that tour. I didn't see them actually for a little while later, but I remember the excitement for that. And just thinking back to, this would have been recorded in 89. And I think UHF comes out in 90, right? So I
no, UHF comes out in 89.
It's all 89.
Well,
okay, so that fits the timeline even better. So so I assume that's why it was just like, this is a fun time to do a bunch of Stone songs.
It makes sense. We also had talked about before about he did. So again, it's obviously well documented. Al is a big Rolling Stones fan, clearly, because he keeps coming back to them. And prior to this, I think the last thing that he touched was he does a Mick Jagger parody of Ruthless People, which, as we have talked about on the show, is one of the most ill-conceived parodies he has ever come up with. And on record, at least in some places, it seems like he asked Mick Jagger permission to do that song. Mick said yes. The song came out, was a flop, but then Al was like, well, I can't not do it.
Yeah.
Like Mick Jagger agreed to let me do his song. I'm really going to turn it down because now it's not as good as I hoped it was going to be.
Yeah.
Like there's no way, he just had to do it and he did it. And maybe this was in his mind some attempt at I need to redeem myself. I'm these guys like me. I love them. We got to do something that properly celebrates
that being
this
said,
band.
that also means that every time he's gone all in on Mick Jagger, it's been his worst selling albums.
I was going to say also on this record that is not successful at all. But I mean, the polkas are never going to he never had a successful polka really.
No,
this is really just for him. I feel like the polkas have always just been for him. At least that's how it seems to me. So
it's also worth noting on this album more than any other album, to fill you in, Christian, we've been really, really, really breaking down when the songs were recorded in the general recording session, because we've come to the conclusion, if you look at it, this was recorded in 6 different sessions, right? And there was one 3-day session where they did all of the sketches and Fun Zone. Another day where they did Money for Nothing. And then the 3rd day was the UHF theme song and Let Me Be Your Hog, which are the only, that's all the stuff that is featured in the movie.
Right.
And then it was 3 months later, 3 or 4 months later, they came in and recorded all of the stuff that does not appear in the movie. And we don't want to say that Al phoned it in. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. But what we think is that they were like, we cannot release a soundtrack EP. You need to beef this out with more stuff. And this was on the 5th of the 6th session, the 6 sessions that he sat down and knocked this specific recording out. So there is a reason to also...
a kinder way to present that would be just, I'm sure he was so burnt out from having, conceived and starred in a movie for the first time ever, really the only time, and, I think that he was touring a very fair amount at this point. And it was probably one of those, like you're saying, you can't put out a movie EP. We need you to record more. And what he probably wanted to do was, just take a break, and he couldn't,
And he absolutely took a break after this soundtrack came out. It was 3 or 4 years until the next album. And spoiler alert for listeners, not a lot of TV appearances in that time period either. He kind of disappears.
No, I
for a
think
few
that
years.
the Dr. Demento 20th anniversary special on MTV, where he did whatever the polka is from Off the Deep End. I'm sorry, I don't have the name of it out the top of my head. And it was the first time he played it, and I was like really excited because it had Nirvana, it had Enter Sandman, it had all this stuff in it, and I hadn't seen him in a little while, and I was excited to see him, and I definitely had started to come around on the polkas by that point. And the fact that it was like he picked all these songs that I really liked in that moment in time for that polka, the one on Off the Deep End. And I
Polka Your Eyes Out.
Polka Your Eyes Out. Yes, thank you. And like I was saying, when I was a kid and I used to listen to I had them all on cassette. I was just like, oh yeah, this is the accordion songs. And then as you get a little bit older, you're like, oh, those are real songs. I didn't realize that. And then by the time this one comes out, I'm like, these are all Rolling Stones songs. This is actually really cool. And then it's like, it's just a light bulb goes on. I'm like, oh, this is brilliant,
Yeah.
And it's just it's so much fun to go back and listen to them, and even ones on later albums that, boy, you don't remember some of those songs until he.
I think I lucked out because the first polka I ever heard was the alternative polka.
Oh, okay.
And I was so into 90s radio that like I immediately got it. Like I was like, this is ridiculous, because I think that is like that specific one I think captures what these are about at their core, which is like the 90s grunge movement was so angry and depressed and like just these nihilistic songs, and to do them with like accordions and like a tuba and like this dancey version, like it immediately made sense in my elementary school mind.
Oh yeah, like if he ever wants to do
ridiculous.
a whole album of accordion covers of Nine Inch Nails, I would definitely buy it. I wouldn't have to listen to a clip from it. I'm like, I want that. Absolutely.
Yes, 100%.
Hi, I'm your inner dream monologue, and you're fast asleep, so I'll be quick. Great job using the Colgate Optic White Overnight Teeth Whitening Pen before bed. When used as directed, it gives you a visibly whiter smile in just 7 days. So while I fly and talk to animals, you're removing teeth stains with ease. Sweet dreams. And when you wake up, keep on living life to the brightest. Colgate Optic White. Find it at all major retailers.
91 Donkey Lane is a magical apartment complex that contains immense power but lacks intelligent inhabitants.
What is happening?
I'm getting texts.
Why are we getting a lot of texts?
People found out what we did.
Oh, dividing Mike Myers into an infinite amount of tiny Mike Myers?
Listen to 91 Donkey Lane for free on Spotify or your favorite podcasting app. More at 91donkeylane.com. See you there, you donkeys.
All right, so let's dive into Hot Rocks Polka. We're kicking it out with It's Only Rock and Roll, But I Like It, and I feel like this is a perfect example of how not a Rolling Stones fan I am. It was not until he started singing the chorus that I even knew what song he was currently recording.
If I could stick my hand in my heart, spill it all over the stage, would it satisfy you? Would it slide on by you? Would you think the boy is strange? Ain't it strange? If I could win, if I could sing a love song so divine, would it be enough for your cheating heart? If I broke down and cried, if I cried, I said, I know it's only rock and roll, but I like it. I know it's only rock and roll, but I like it, yes I do. I really, 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 really do. Hey!
It's got that great little bit of just general, I guess what we would call, again, part of the Earbooker polka, which is his little compositions that go around the Stone stuff. Starts with a little interstitial, like, intro, that very classic polka vibe. And then, goes right into... One of the things I noted right away on this, starting with It's Only Rock and Roll, But I Like It, is he really, on most polkas, he moves lightning quick between songs, and he really milks these.
Yeah, there's only two that he zooms past.
This is like you get a full verse and you get a chorus of It's Only Rock and Roll. Like he is taking his time. He's really like enjoying. He's letting all of these really like exist for a little while, which I actually really appreciate.
I think a big strike though that he didn't start the polka with "Start Me Up." That just seems like an obvious one. It doesn't even show up anywhere in it. Just
he does not do "Start Me Up."
Right? Yeah. Absolutely. And
Yeah,
that would have been a good one to
that's-
start with. But yeah, I agree that I like the way that it builds as we go through the songs. We'll kind of talk about, how much it picks up. But yeah, I like that because I found a list of the time codes. So it's only rock and roll he does from 12 seconds to 50 seconds. That's a long time to have
40 seconds of one song.
40
Yeah,
seconds of one song. And it's 30 of the next one. And I like how it starts to get a little bit more furious, like, faster accordion and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep those timestamps up because I think I figured out what the shortest one is, but I would love for you to officially confirm it. The only other thing I want to say with It's Only Rock and Roll, but I like it. Love the very end with the I really, really do.
Hey!
It's like
I do like that, and I'm glad that even though it's a polka, he still said rock and roll. He didn't say it's only polka, but I like it. That would have been kind of funny, but I think it's better to just keep the words from the song because that's what these are.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. No, this is it's a great, and again, the end, the classic. Hey, to segue into the next, Al he has this like a really large bag of tricks that he uses for these polkas to get himself from song to song. And that is one that I'll never get bored of. Every time I hear him do that, it makes me laugh.
The Hays are perfect always.
Yeah.
And then it bleeds into Brown Sugar, probably one of the more controversial Rolling Stones songs in 2023.
Go, slave ship bound for cotton fields, sold in a market down in New Orleans. Scarred old slaver knows he's doing all right. Hear him with the women just around midnight. Brown sugar! How come you taste so good? Brown sugar! Just like a young girl should.
And my biggest note on this one was that I do laugh every time that everybody's yelling brown sugar in the background of the chorus. It's great.
Where it just, da, 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 da. And then it's like, the big break for everyone to sing it. It also sounds great following again, this is when we get a verse and then a chorus. And after that, the instrumental section and the sound of Al on accordion playing Keith's lead guitar line, like the lead lick from this song, sounds so good. This is just one of those examples, like every once in a while I'm blown away by how great the arrangement is. Like the accordion version of that guitar part, I just love so much. Like I want to hear more of that.
No, I agree.
It is definitely jarring hearing Al sing these lyrics.
It's very much so.
We have to acknowledge, and he kind of just blasts through it. I mean, another just funny thing about this in general, right, is that the Rolling Stones are all about like sex appeal and swagger and just charisma. And Al, of course, at least in his gimmick, has zero of any of that.
Yeah.
So his like straight delivery and just kind of like nasally like spitting out these lines just like as if he is like a nerd giving a history lesson on the board is like, it's just so like that's... If there's any comedy in what he's doing here, like just straight comedy, that's what it is, right? Is this juxtaposition of him doing these very charged songs, just right down the middle, very matter-of-factly.
And the point about, the band shouting out Brown Sugar, it makes you think about, boy, how fun would it be if he did do this live? Because, that's a great time for crowd participation as everybody gets there.
I know, right?
So, yeah.
It's a shame, actually, that he didn't, because now in hindsight, like, now would not be the time to start doing this song.
No. I think this one
might have lapsed. I know even the Stones have stopped doing it because they started to feel funny about it. I do think that from everything I've seen, I feel like this is not like. I don't want to walk into a dangerous zone here. I feel like the Stones' intentions were correct on this, and they were just telling a very disturbing story of a thing that they did not approve of from the past. But still, once again, in this day and age, saying these out your mouth as if you're the person.
Yeah,
it doesn't read very well at all.
When you're Mick Jagger, you want to have as few headaches in your life as possible, so it's very easy. We're just not going to sing it anymore. It's very.
They are very lucky that they have enough huge songs that it's not a problem. We'll just skip this one. It's okay.
100%. So now getting into probably one of my favorite of the Stones hits. You can't always get what you want.
I saw her today at the reception, a glass of wine in her hand. I knew she would meet her connection. At her feet was a footloose man. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, you might find you get what you need.
Maybe I'm wrong here, but it feels like Al is doing something really weird with the melody line of this chorus in the way that he's singing it, where he's singing it more down than up.
Yeah, he's doing this descending. He's changed the structure of the song a little bit. You can't always get what you want. Like he's walking down with the accordion notes as well, which I don't think is in the original song. If it is, it's subtle and I can't hear it. But it's a nice little change. He also has that in the verses, a lightning fast, like diddle, diddle, diddle. Like he's really like, as you said earlier, Christian, this is like, as it goes, it just gets bigger and faster and the energy just goes up and up and up in this one. It's very, which I think he usually strives for, but some of the polkas in the middle have like a break.
Yeah.
Where they kind of reset and start over. And this one does not. Well, it technically has a break coming up for Miss You, but even that doesn't lose any energy. It just keeps flying forward.
Miss You and this next one, I think, are at competition for the shortest song appearance, which is Honky Tonk Woman.
Right.
You need honky tonk women. Gimme, gimme, gimme the honky tonk blues.
Seems like it is
just
in and out.
The thing that I love
quick.
about You Can't Always Get What You Want, that it has the the very Al mouth fart, which I believe George Carlin called the bilabial fricative. You know, just the fact that we're getting the fart noises in the end, and it's just like, I don't know. I was like 13 when this came out, so this was still in the sweet spot for me of like, there we go. That's what we're
immediately
waiting for.
following the line of the woman with the glass of wine in her hand.
Right.
And it's
the pop noise of the bottle.
Right.
It's
Exactly. Yeah. So
the sound effects really go a long way on this.
Absolutely.
But am I incorrect? Honky Tonk Woman, the shortest time frame, right?
Honky Tonk Women, we only get 13 seconds of it before he jumps into Under My Thumb. And that's like, like we were saying, it's building up until this point, but then the songs start coming faster. He starts playing faster. And, maybe why that's part of the reason why in the moment he's like, I'm not going to play this live. I'll be too exhausted. It's like the Beatles singing Twist and Shout at the end of their set, because it's like, I'm just going to be ruined, so
Exactly.
I can't play the accordion that fast.
It's too much. Yeah.
Under my thumb, the girl who once had me down. Under my thumb, the girl who once pushed me around. It's done to me. Yes, it is. The way she talks when she's spoken to down to me. The change has come. She's under my thumb.
But so Honky Tonk Women, I think, is the shortest, although none of the songs really go for too long from this point on, because he gets so many in the next couple minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the very quick, he basically just sings the chorus to Honky Tonk Woman and then right into Under My Thumb. And I wrote down, I'm listening to my headphones right now to remind myself, but I wrote down the instrumentation that's going on underneath Al was really interesting to me in this one. And listening back to it, there's just so much happening on this one.
There's this really great, like, old school muted trumpet part.
Yep.
In Under My Thumb that's going da 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 da. Like, this is again, it's funny because I said this, we didn't acknowledge, but this is the longest break we've had between polkas, because he did an album without a polka, and now we haven't talked about one since we talked about Polka Party.
Yeah.
So for us, it's been months. I said on Polka Party that I felt like he was just getting better and better at these as he was going. Like, his ability to make these transitions smooth, but also like get the arrangements like really like to me. I feel it again. I'm not like tipping my hand to rankings ahead, but there's extra instrumentation and tricks and production value in this polka that I feel like we have not heard before.
Yes.
This is really very, very well thought out and well composed. And he's integrating things that are in the Stones tracks, but I think in other ones he might have glossed over them quicker and just kind of spat it out and moved on to the next thing quicker. But this is all really, really thoughtfully done while keeping it in the polka aesthetic. I love the Under My Thumb vibe is really, really good.
The Under My Thumb vibe is really good. And then we get into one of my favorite elements of any polka, which is we get into Ruby Tuesday, and I love just listening to Jim West just beat the shit out of that banjo.
So goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. Who could hang a name on you when you change with every new day? Still, I'm gonna miss you.
Just strumming like a bat out of hell on that thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, he plays the banjo like he is trying to hurt it.
Yeah, there's so much going on in this. I feel like this is the most, like you said, like there's so much production happening. There's so many extra elements that I think we do see in the future polkas way more than we saw in the earlier polkas. Probably the most seamless transition is off of Ruby Tuesday, where he literally ends with the lyric "Miss You," very quickly does the "Miss You" woo-hoo-hoos, and then right into "Sympathy of the Devil," but you're still getting a woo-hoo backup vocal from Sympathy. Like it's absolutely the most brilliant bridge has ever done in any song.
The connective tissue he found between "Goodbye Ruby Tuesday," "Miss You," and "Sympathy" is fantastic.
I miss you. Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. I've been around for a long, long year. So many a man's soul and faith. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guessed my name. 'Cause what's puzzling you is the nature of my game. I said, hey, you! Get off of my cloud! Hey, you! Get off of my cloud! Hey, you! Get off of my cloud! Don't hang around, 'cause two's a crowd!
Like that is so good, and I mean, he's brilliant, of course, for coming up with it that way, but also this is the nice benefit of having, like, he's got a big, I mean, they're all still hits, so it's not like he's pulling deep cuts from the Stones, but he did have a lot of Stones material to choose from here. I think that, like, if he was super familiar, like, this just, it opens a door for him. Like, if he's doing the polkas, like we said earlier, where he's trying to hit, like, the current pop music markers, he's limited by what's in front of him in that moment, and he wants it to be relevant and topical and feel like a time capsule of the moment. With this, he's got, at this moment in time where he's doing this polka in 89, he's got, like 30 years of music to pull from. So that's a tremendous amount of catalog that he can look at to really get this super slick.
Don't forget how it's probably received in a very comedic way, because this is about 10 years after "Miss You" would have come out, and bands who dabbled in disco songs were not playing them in 1989.
That's true.
Kiss wasn't playing "I Was Made for Loving You" at that point, and the Stones weren't playing "Miss You." I saw them in 2012, and they did "Emotional Rescue" for the first time in 30 years, so it's like, wow. Eventually they kind of come back around, and it's like, oh, this stuff is kind of fun. I can see it for the moment. But yeah, the late 80s was like, we're going to just pretend we never did any disco, but the oohs and "Miss You" were perfect.
I wish that there was more of it. I'm bummed it's so short. Yeah. No, I was just saying, I'm bummed that "Miss You" is so short, because it sounds beautiful.
Yeah,
when
the fact that he didn't get a note back from it probably wouldn't have been Mick and Keith. The Stones publishing was like, yeah, use whatever songs you want. And there wasn't an issue with using a song that maybe they were trying to put in the rearview mirror. So
that's a really good point, Christian. Yeah, I think you're exactly right, because it's super cool that he does use that. Like, if you're thinking of it in the context of the Stones, like, all of these up until this point are classic, like, unassailably cool Stones hits, right? And then to throw in "Miss You" at this point in time, that was not a cool song. And I don't think he is throwing it in to make fun at all. It seems like it is right there with everything else. Like, he is putting it in between "Goodbye Ruby Tuesday" and "Sympathy for the Devil," like exactly even footing, which I love. I think that's just awesome.
No, I agreed. And then, yes, the woohoos kind of come back a little bit with "Sympathy for the Devil" as we enter into there. Jim West is back on his banjo, and then you get the woo-woos in the background. This might be my favorite of all of the songs polka-fied.
Well, I love excuse me, sorry. I love the serious tenor of Al's voice, where he's like, from the start of the song, "Please allow me to introduce myself." The idea that Weird Al might be the devil it's so funny, because one, I'd love to see him with the horns and the pitchfork and all that. But the idea, you get to hell and then Al welcomes you there and he's singing this song to you. It's perfect, because he doesn't, there's different levels to the way that he sings these polkas. This isn't the high, like, over the top one. This is like, hey, this is serious business. Let me introduce myself. I'm Satan. How are you? And I think That's the fun of these polkas is
I totally agree,
the roller coaster in the best way, that it goes up and it goes down and it surprises you. It goes left, it goes right, everything. And I think that this might be, I agree with Matt, this might be the most fun moment in the polka for me, is when he starts singing Sympathy for the Devil.
Totally.
And then it bleeds into, we get some more background yelling with, "Hey, you, get off my cloud." Delightful. Just those yells, those crowd yells are great.
And when I hear that song to this day, "Get Off My Cloud," I think of this presentation of it, the way that he says, "Hey, you, get off." Yeah, it's like it didn't ruin the song for me, but I don't think of it the same way ever since.
See, and I'm the total opposite, because I hear the "Hey, you, get off my cloud," and I immediately think of Method Man kicking off METHOD Man with "Hey, you, get off my cloud."
Yeah, and again, a funny, like, the back and forth of it, right? Because we said, like, Sympathy for the Devil has this, like, much more serious tone for a second, and then as soon as this starts, we're right back into fun time. This is, like, instantly, like, a much brighter, happier thing. Like, the start of this with the call and response is a great little break, following Sympathy, and then goes into Shattered.
Laughter, joy, and loneliness, and sex, and sex, and sex, and sex. Look at me. I'm in tatters. I'm shattered.
Which I genuinely, this again showing how lukewarm I still am as a Rolling Stones fan, I genuinely have never heard the song "Shattered" in my entire life. I have no clue what this song is.
It's it's like, I think it's an early 80s hit, unless I'm mistaken. Maybe it's late 70s.
It might have even been a little earlier, maybe late 70s.
Yeah. So
it was,
it's definitely way past, like, their initial peak, and
78, it's on Some Girls.
Okay, yeah, see, that makes sense.
I just checked, yeah.
Which it's another great example of an album that they made, years after the Beatles stopped. Some Girls is right up there. But what I love about this, and it shows that by this point, my parents weren't listening to my music so closely, it's Weird Al singing "Sex and Sex and Sex and Sex." It might be one of the funniest things he's done in his career. It's just, you were talking about, he doesn't have that bad boy sex appeal that Mick and Keith had, and here's Weird Al saying "Sex and Sex and Sex and Sex." It's very
laughter,
funny.
Joy, and loneliness, and sex and sex and sex and sex.
Yeah,
it's hilarious.
It's as if he did an expletive laden song. It's just him saying sex that many times. It was so funny to think about. And
we have joked before that in his polkas, it seems like every once in a while he really relishes, because he's so clean most of the time, and he really relishes. We said, like, at the end of, I can't remember which one, where he ends with the "Frankie Goes to Hollywood" and ends with a very, very triumphant "When You Want to Come."
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
That's his big finale. Like, I think when Al has an excuse to be a little bit blue, I think he jumps at it.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I think that's true. And then the "sex and sex and sex and sex" leads us into "Let's Spend the Night Together." I don't think that's accidental.
This doesn't happen to me every day, whoa my. Let's spend the night together. No excuses offered anyway, oh my. Let's spend the night together. I'll satisfy your every need. Every need. And now I know you'll satisfy me. My. Let's spend the night together. Now I need you more than ever. Let's spend the night together now.
Another song that I'm pretty sure I've heard, but it's not one that immediately registers for me when I'm thinking of, if you ask me to name 10 Rolling Stones hits, "Let's Spend the Night Together" would probably not be one of the ones that I was able to come up with on the spot.
That's a really good one. That's an early one of theirs. And I would not have known this offhand, but that was, I just checked, that was released as a double A-side single alongside Ruby Tuesday.
Oh, wow.
So those came out at the same time. That was that's a really good double.
Yeah.
Good for them. Well done.
Yeah. No, it's like neither one could be the B-side. And, you think about the music industry only a few years later. It's like, wait, why did you put out a double A-side? Why didn't you put out two singles, both with B-sides, and you could make twice as much money?
Make twice as much, yeah.
But and that's it's a great one. I mean, before I re-listened to this, I hadn't listened to it in a while, before I was getting ready to do this. So I just wanted to listen to it clean the first time. And I kind of forgot which ones were all in it. There were a few that I remembered, but so it was like the rave off, as we've been talking about, as it starts to really build and the intensity, these last couple, it's so much fun to hear them pick up. And yeah, Weird Al singing sex and sex and sex and sex, and then let's spend the night together. A song that they couldn't even sing on the Ed Sullivan Show. They had to
That's right.
So let's spend some time together. So it's
okay. Yes, I definitely know this song then, because I know that story and I've watched that performance. Okay.
Yeah.
So I know we've given a lot of compliments to Al throughout this episode on the transitions. The transition into I Can't Get No Satisfaction is real clunky. It's like the music just stops and they just start playing a different song. It's not smooth in the slightest.
Yeah.
I can't get no satisfaction. I can't get no girly action. 'Cause I tried, and 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 I tried. I can't get no. I can't get no. I can't get no satisfaction, satisfaction, satisfaction. Hey!
It almost makes you think that a song was there and got cut at the last second, and they're like, well, this is how it's going to be then, I guess.
Or they had finished it and they were like, wait, that's not a good ending. We have to really amp it up. Yeah.
Well, so I would say it's a little bit clunky, but I think that it's like that because I think they ultimately really wanted to nail the riff to satisfaction. Like the riff had to be there, like just as it is, as everyone recognizes it. And that riff and polka music are not compatible.
No.
It just does not go together. And you can actually hear, this is some real like subtle music stuff for people. And I don't know how interested people will be, but when you listen to, it's just the riff and then the whole band comes in playing the satisfaction riff in polka style. And if you listen to the bass part, normally it would just follow that riff, basically, is what the bass line does. But Steve J on the bass is playing all of these extra high notes and adding these other things to try to make that riff and the polka oompa 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 thing fit together. It is a little bit weird, but for me, like masterfully done. Like it shouldn't work. This is what it sounds like to me, is they were trying to make satisfaction fit in this form, especially not just like the lyric of the verse is fine. You can get that in this form, but getting that riff to play on its own like that, it just does not, it's not meant to fit this sort of a speed and drum beat.
Yeah, and interestingly, Devo had basically a hit with their cover of Satisfaction, but I personally prefer this reimagining of it to the way they did it. Theirs is very inventive, and
as a side note. Yeah, Devo's version was so inventive and changed it that they basically could not integrate the riff.
Right.
Into their version.
Yeah.
The Devo version does not have the da 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 da, because that line just needs this very straight drum beat to accommodate it, and Devo's version completely throws it away. And Al is integrating it to the best of his ability, but it was definitely, you can hear the effort that they went to try to make that moment happen.
Yeah, but the most fun part is the rave off at the end where they just keep saying satisfaction. And what is that framing device that he created called? Is it the polka?
The earbooker polka?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because I had seen that in the notes somewhere, and I didn't realize it was called that. But to just get satisfaction that many times, and it's again, I know we've mentioned it a few times, but it just seems like this would be really fun to watch performed live. Because especially the way that it ends so big like that. This is almost like an maybe not the final song of an encore, but the first song for an encore. This would be pretty great.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's really a shame. I don't know what the only other thing I was trying to think of, and I can't find any definitive information on this. I tried looking. I don't know if Al toured UHF.
I don't think he did.
I don't think he did.
I would assume he didn't. Yeah.
It might have been that simple that he just because he did not tour UHF, he did another proper tour for Off the Deep End, and Off the Deep End had its own polka, which was Polka Your Eyes Out, which they wound up doing on that tour. So it might have just been a symptom of it coming out when he wasn't actively on the road promoting this music.
Al definitely handled UHF the way you need to, which is when a movie comes out and does not do well and it's derided and becomes basically the butt of a joke, just come back in a little while and people
take a short break and reset. Yeah,
exactly. I think that and it was one of those movies that I grew up in a fairly rural suburb of New York, and there was no opportunity for me to see this movie in the theater. So it was long afterwards. I think it was when I was on VHS. I didn't get to see that. Oddly enough, two of the biggest busts of the '80s, that and Howard the Duck, were the two movies that I most wanted to see that never came anywhere near me that I could actually go and see. Man, my parents were going to drive me into the city to see the Weird Al movie, but I think people obviously look back on it so fondly now. But I definitely remember the moment in time when it was, it was definitely the butt of a lot of jokes. The Weird Al movie UHF. So
I know, so sad and feels so unfair in hindsight now.
Absolutely,
But look, we've said it before. It doesn't pay to be the first person to do something, and I think Al. We've had multiple comedians come on this show already and say Al was doing comedy that was a solid decade, if not 2 decades, ahead of the rest of the comedy world at that point in time. So he's laughing now.
That's true.
UHF is like a beloved masterpiece. Matt, I think it's time for us to do the rankings on where we place this on our personal polka lists.
Yeah, I'm extra curious where you're going to put this, Matt, because as you mentioned before, you're not really a Stones guy. And so I'm wondering if you're going to place this so we only have 3 polkas so far. We've talked about Polkas on 45, which was on his, that's on In 3D. Hooked on Polkas, which is on Dare to Be Stupid.
Polka Party.
And Polka Party, which is on Polka Party. Even Worse famously did not have a polka. And now here we are, the 4th one we are talking about.
I think I'm putting it at the bottom. I hate saying it, but it's like I have to think of it through the lens of which are the polkas I'm most likely to actively sit down and listen to. Mm-hmm. And this is the bottom for me. I appreciate everything that this song is. I think that it is a masterclass in him really cracking the code on how to make these transitions even more seamless and all of that. But I have no connection to the source material in a deep way. And I think that makes or breaks the enjoyment of a polka almost more than anything else to a certain extent. So
See, I love ranking the polkas with you because this is, well, as I've said many times, I hate it when we agree. That's well documented.
Where do we never agree on polkas?
I hate it when we never agree on the polkas because for me, the source material, I feel like there's nothing he does where the source material matters less to me than the polka because it's all about the spectacle of what it is. It's the achievement of making this happen. Honestly, some of these polkas I've heard hundreds of times throughout my life, and every time I go back and listen to it again, I am floored at how much work they must have put into this. It just, and again, as we said, it's never been a single. This is never going to be a thing that really works for him. If anything, this is expensive. He has to pay all these royalties to do this. This is a labor of love in such a major way that I admire it so much. As a result, I'm tempted to put this at number 1 because again, I really do feel like he gets better at these every time. I'm going to put it at number 2, just below Polka Party, because that one has a little bit of a closer place in my heart, just from my own background with it. But I really do sincerely think that each one of these, so far at least, has gotten better and better from a arrangement, performance, composition standpoint. He is just they are just amazing at this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Matt Kelly, you had an observation that I think is definitely the risk of doing any single artist. It's if you're not connected with that artist, the polka is kind of lost on you. I think that
correct.
If he did a career spanning Madonna one with some of the deep cuts, I would probably be like, nah, I don't like that.
Yeah,
one,
Yeah,
exactly.
but
exactly.
having Ray of Light a little bit later, and some of the other ones he did works perfectly. But I think that, and maybe it's something that he's mindful of. But I do agree with Matthew.
I do want him to do a Beatles one. Now that I've pitched that out there into the universe, I think a Beatles polka would be amazing. But,
but then
again, I can't imagine.
Then you deal with the
that.
publishing, like which ones does Michael Jackson's estate still own? So then maybe those are the ones he wants to do, and maybe that's a big reason why he didn't do the Beatles. But,
there's definitely a lot of I don't know. This is another great. I would love to get some insight into this because this is a complicated thing. He can pay the royalty for these songs, but also he has a writing credit himself. Right. And generally speaking, if you do a straight cover of something, that's just you pay a fee and you move on. That's easily done in music. But if you're sharing the writing credit on a larger piece like this,
it becomes way more complicated.
It gets complicated, and there must be, like I said, there's no world. I know enough to know that he loses money doing this, for sure. He's giving away more than he's earning.
Yeah.
So that is, again, it's just a pure labor of love. And that's probably best case scenario. For some people, they might just be like, well, we're not going to let you do a version of our song unless it's a straight cover. Any interpolation like that could just be denied.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Christian, where do you want to put Hot Rock's Polka?
So I've got the guest rankings in front of me, and I have to say that I have not kept up on the guest rankings. I love to see that Nature Trail to Hell is still basically number 8 or so. It's in the top 10, which that was the last time I was on. And
it actually has been moved. You might be happy to know that it got pushed down a few times, and we've had multiple guests come on and be like, Nature Trail to Hell has no business being down there, and it's been moved up many times.
Yep.
And no one has ever said anything bad about Nature Trail to Hell.
Yeah, no, and I'm looking, and Matt sent it to me on 2 screens, so I'm definitely looking at all of the entries. It's very easy for me. There's a couple on there. I think I Lost on Jeopardy is a fun one. Money for Nothing, Beverly Hillbillies, I was never strong in my book, even as a kid. Maybe that's the thing I didn't have any attachment to, was the Beverly Hillbillies.
There you go.
So what jumps out at me is you have Hooked on Polkas right after Like a Surgeon. And look, I love this polka. It's not better than Like a Surgeon. It's not better than Christmas at Ground Zero. But I can easily push down Hooked on Polkas and the rest of the list. So I would put it above Hooked on Polkas.
Okay. And then
that.
you get one move. You can move one of these songs anywhere you want. So where do you want to relocate a song?
Well, I am shocked that Peter and the Wolf is where it is, but good for whoever liked it. That's great.
On the day we're recording this, that episode just came out.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that has just appeared. Yeah.
But I think that I'm gonna move Money for Nothing. Can I move it all the way down to, because living with a hernia is much funnier to me. So
all right, it's Money for Nothing.
Yeah.
Beverly Hillbillies at the bottom of the list officially.
Do love the video for that. I have to say the video is cool. It's the style of the Dire Straits one, but yeah.
Yes.
But look, it's always fun to talk about these, and you gave me an excuse to, I don't know, I listened probably 30 times to this song over the last few days. So it's great. And I'm not gonna hear the Stones in the same way for at least a little while, because
agreed.
These versions. Yeah.
Happy to do that to you. Christian, before we completely sign off, you have almost as many podcasts as I do. So where can people go and check out the stuff that you do?
Yeah, well, the stuff on Geekscape is easily found. We do the Geekscape Book Club once a month. We usually will tell you what we're reading the next month to give people a chance, but also you'll see from the title. It's like, oh, this is about that. I'll go ahead and read it. And we have a lot of fun with that. And we recently moved the show that I do, Marvel Movie Talk, which is a little bit of a misnomer because we're talking about television a lot of the time. We'll talk about comics a lot of the time. But it was an existing brand from, as they say, another network. So we kept the name just for that point. And I have my own podcast, The Blackcast, BLADTCAST. And I know how long it's been since I was on here because I was promoting that we were going to have Dana Carvey on. And since then, I've had separately Dana Carvey and John Lovitz. So you can find both of those episodes, video or
amazing.
audio. And and then there's also a fun one where I had Carl Hamburger, who's the host of a show called Who Are These Podcasts, which is a little bit of a mean-spirited but mostly fun roast-style show. And I had him basically pick apart the first episode of my personal podcast, The Blackcast, and he did not go easy on me, and it was a lot of fun. So you can find all those on the Blackcast feed, BLADTCAST. You'll see honestly some guests that I'm surprised that I talked to. I'm like, I've talked to like members of Skid Row. I've talked to Don McLean, who did American Pie. And I'm just like, if they're willing to talk to me, I'm more than happy to sit down and talk to someone. So just look for the Blackcast. That's the short answer for what you asked, Matt.
All right. Love that. And we will be back next week with the title track of this album for us to analyze. So stay tuned.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.